A shadow clings to a face 2,000 years dead. Throughout history, a few select individuals have achieved the impossible. They have defied the relentless march of decay, their bodies frozen in time by forces we still struggle to understand. These are not the carefully prepared mummies of pharaohs, but accidental marvels of nature and bizarre circumstance. From the depths of peat bogs to the heights of mountain peaks, their silent forms now hold secrets that unravel our assumptions about life, death, and the passage of time. By the end of this journey, you will have explored 30 of the most bafflingly preserved human remains ever discovered, each a puzzle missing its final piece. We will meet a man with a noose around his neck who looks merely asleep, and a medieval woman frozen mid-step with her tools in hand. What does it take to stop decomposition in its tracks? And what can these eternal witnesses tell us about the forgotten moments they endured? What forgotten chapter of history would you most want a preserved body to narrate for us? His story begins not in a tomb, but in a quiet Danish bog one morning in May 1950. Two brothers, cutting peat for fuel, made a discovery that would stop them cold. There, nestled in the dark earth, was a man who looked as if he had simply fallen asleep. This is the Tolland man, and his preservation is so perfect it feels like a miracle. His face is serene with a gentle stubble across his chin and lips slightly parted. He wears a simple leather cap, and around his neck rests a braided leather noose, the very instrument of his death. To see him is to look directly into the eyes of someone from 2,000 years ago, a connection across time that is both breathtaking and deeply unsettling. The science behind his survival is a fascinating paradox. The peat bog that cradled him is a unique environment, cold, acidic, and completely devoid of oxygen. These conditions halted the bacteria that caused decay, tanning his skin and internal organs into leather, preserving every wrinkle and follicle. Yet that same acid slowly leached the calcium from his bones, leaving them dissolved. He is a man of skin and substance, but without a skeleton. This perfect storm of preservation is incredibly rare, making each bog body a precious and fragile window. The greatest mystery, however, is not how he died, but why. The noose tells us his end was deliberate. Was he a criminal, executed for some forgotten crime? Or was he a willing offering, a sacrifice to the gods for a bountiful harvest? His peaceful expression suggests a lack of struggle, perhaps even acceptance. Archaeologists found his last meal was a simple porridge of grains and seeds, a humble fare that offers no clear answer. He remains suspended between two interpretations, a silent man at the center of a 2,000-year-old question. His preservation grants us an intimate portrait, yet it steadfastly guards the final truth of his story. The serene face of the Tolland man speaks of a deliberate ritual end, but our next witness was captured by pure, chaotic accident. High in the Swiss Alps, near a place called the Spill Pass, a sudden summer avalanche thundered down a mountainside centuries ago. It did not just bury its victim, it entombed her. When a melting glacier released her in September 1938, she was not a scattered collection of bones. She was a complete woman, frozen in a moment of time. They called her the Lady of the Spill, and she was found sitting upright, as if resting, still clutching her wooden walking stick. Her woolen cape, her leather shoes, even the belt pouch at her waist were all perfectly intact. This was not the slow chemical tanning of a bog, but the instant deep freeze of a natural refrigerator, sealing her away from the ravages of decay. The mystery of her preservation is as precise as it is rare. Most bodies caught in glacial ice are churned, crushed, and transported over decades, their belongings scattered across miles by the glacier's relentless flow. But the Lady of the Spill was different. The avalanche that took her life also became her protector, encasing her in a static tomb of ice and rock that was then incorporated into the glacier. This capsule shielded her from the grinding movement, keeping her body, her clothing, and her tools together in one poignant scene. It was a freak geological event that created a perfect snapshot. Who was she? The clues she carried tell a story, but not the ending. Her simple tools, a wooden bowl, a knife, a fire-starting kit, suggest she was a traveler or perhaps a herder moving between valleys. She carried no weapons, no jewels, no signs of great wealth. She was an ordinary person on an ordinary journey when the mountain decided otherwise. Yet her very ordinariness is what makes her so compelling. She represents the countless unnamed souls history forgets, their stories swallowed by time. Here, by a twist of frozen fate, one of them was returned to us, sitting patiently on a mountainside for over 400 years, waiting to be found. Her preservation asks us to consider all the quiet, personal journeys that have been lost, and the sheer, random chance that allows a single one to step out of the shadows. While the mountains preserved a solitary traveler, an entire workforce was captured deep within the earth in a place where the very air turned flesh into leather. In northwestern Iran, miners digging a tunnel in the Cherabad salt mine in 1994 struck something far more startling than a mineral vein. They uncovered a bearded head, its skin tanned a deep brown, hair and mustache still intact, staring back from the salt-encrusted wall. This was the first of the salt men, and over the following years, more would be found. A crew of ancient miners frozen in a moment of disaster. One individual, discovered later, is astonishingly complete. His bearded face is etched with a stern expression. His body, still clothed in fragments of a woolen tunic and sturdy leather boots. Tools lay nearby, simple iron picks and a walnut, the latter perhaps a humble snack from his final break. The environment that saved him is as harsh as the bog or the glacier, but utterly different. The Cherabad mine is hyper-arid and saturated with salt. This combination drew all moisture from the bodies in a process akin to pickling, dehydrating the tissue so completely that bacteria could not take hold. The salt permeated their cells, creating a natural embalming so effective it preserved not just skin and hair, but internal organs and even stomach contents, a level of detail that bogs and ice cannot offer. The central mystery here is one of intent versus accident. The initial terrifying theory is obvious: a mining catastrophe. These men could have been entombed instantly by a collapsing tunnel, their tools and personal effects scattered around them in a scene of sudden chaos. Yet some archaeologists point to curious details. One salt man was found with a ceramic pot placed near his head, and 3 of the individuals were discovered in a small separate chamber. Could these items or placements hint at something more deliberate? Perhaps a ritual burial or an offering to the spirits of the mine. The salt preserved their bodies with incredible fidelity, but it has crystallized the moment of their death into an ambiguous tableau. Were they victims of a tragic workplace accident, or did they enter the dark, sacred depths of the earth for a purpose beyond mere labor? The salt keeps its secrets, holding these men in a perpetual state of suspense between a collapse and a ceremony. From the silent, crystalline tombs of the salt mine, we travel to a place where preservation took on a startlingly theatrical quality. In the Mexican city of Guanajuato, death did not fade quietly into dust. Instead, it put on a macabre show. Here, in the municipal cemetery's crypts, a collection of bodies refused to decompose. They became the mummies of Guanajuato, and their appearance is hauntingly expressive. Skin has shrunk tight over bone, often pulling lips back into silent screams or peaceful smiles. Fingers are curled, burial clothes cling in tattered shrouds, and for many, their mouths are forever open, as if caught in a final, soundless gasp. This gallery of the dead was not created by human hands, but by the earth itself. The soil in this region is exceptionally dry and rich in minerals like alum and nitrate, which acted as a powerful, natural desiccant, sucking every trace of moisture from the bodies interred there. The arid, ventilated crypts provided the perfect environment for this slow, unintentional mummification. Yet this leads to the central, unsettling puzzle of Guanajuato. Why did only a specific set of bodies undergo this dramatic transformation, while others buried in the same cemetery during the same period decomposed normally? The answer is not simple, and it turns a strange phenomenon into a genuine historical mystery. One prevailing theory points to the cholera epidemics that swept through the region in the 1800s. It is possible that victims of this swift and devastating disease died so quickly that their body chemistry was altered, perhaps through severe dehydration or a lack of certain bacteria at the time of death, making them more susceptible to the drying effects of the soil. Other factors, like the depth of burial, the type of coffin used, or even the specific mineral content in the soil directly surrounding an individual crypt, might have created tiny, hyper-localized zones of preservation. The result is a random, selective gallery where one crypt holds a perfectly preserved woman in her burial dress, while the next holds only bones. These mummies were not meant to be seen. They were ordinary citizens, buried with the expectation of returning to the earth. Instead, local laws requiring families to pay a burial tax led to the exhumation of those whose fees went unpaid, revealing the shocking state of their remains. What began as a municipal necessity became a public spectacle, raising profound questions about dignity, display, and the sheer, unpredictable power of nature. The mummies of Guanajuato stand as a stark reminder that the line between dust and permanence is often drawn by the smallest, most accidental of circumstances. The unsettling expressions of Guanajuato's mummies find a chilling parallel in the sands of ancient Egypt, a civilization famous for its serene and dignified death masks. Yet among the carefully prepared pharaohs and nobles, a few stand out as horrifying anomalies. They are known as the Screaming Mummies. One of the most famous is the Screaming Woman, discovered in a royal cache at Deir el-Bahri. Her face is a frozen mask of pure anguish, mouth wrenched open in a silent, eternal shriek. Equally disturbing is Unknown Man E, found in the same tomb, his body contorted, hands and feet bound, with an expression of sheer terror etched into his features. For archaeologists used to the peaceful visages of the afterlife, these discoveries were profoundly disturbing. They seemed to violate the very purpose of mummification, which was to create a perfect, tranquil vessel for the soul's journey. So what could cause such a drastic departure from tradition? The first theory is one of simple, gruesome error. Could these be cases of botched mummification? If a body was eviscerated and treated with natron salt, but then, for some reason, was sealed in a tomb before the drying process was complete, the resulting decay and bloating could distort the facial features into a scream. Yet this seems unlikely for the elite burials in a royal cache, where embalmers were the best of their craft. A second, more medical theory suggests tetanus. This devastating disease causes severe muscle spasms, including lockjaw, which could force the mouth into a rigid, open position at the moment of death. If the individual died in this state, the rictus could be preserved through mummification. But the most haunting explanation is a deliberate, magical one. In Egyptian belief, a vengeful spirit could return to harm the living. The bound limbs and agonized pose of Unknown Man E have led some scholars to propose he was a high-status criminal or a traitor, perhaps a prince involved in a harem conspiracy. His mummification may have been a punitive act, his mouth left open or his body tightly bound, not for preservation, but to prevent his ba, or soul, from crying out or speaking spells in the afterlife. He was mummified to be trapped forever, denied the peaceful eternity promised to others. When contrasted with the calm, gold-covered face of a pharaoh like Tutankhamun, these screaming figures become even more jarring. They are not accidents of nature, like the bog bodies or salt men. They feel intentional, charged with a dark purpose. Were they victims of a terrible death or recipients of a terrifying curse? Their preserved screams offer no answers, only a visceral reminder that in the ancient quest for immortality, some souls may have been sentenced to a conscious, tortured forever. The silent screams of mummies hint at a fear of decay, but another tradition claims to have conquered it entirely through divine grace. Within the Catholic Church, there exists a phenomenon known as incorruptibility, where the bodies of certain saints are said to remain miraculously free from decomposition, often for centuries, without any form of embalming. These are not the leathery, skeletal figures of bog or salt, but individuals who often appear eerily lifelike, as if merely sleeping. Saint Bernadette of Lourdes, who died in 1879, is one of the most famous examples. When her coffin was exhumed decades later, her body was found intact, her skin reportedly still soft and supple, her features recognizable. Similarly, the early martyr Saint Cecilia, who died in the 2nd century, was said to have been found perfectly preserved when her tomb was opened in the year 1599. Her body as if untouched by the intervening 1500 years. To the faithful, this is not an accident of chemistry, but a visible sign of holiness, a divine seal upon a life of extraordinary virtue. The bodies are often displayed in glass-sided reliquaries, their hands folded in prayer, their faces peaceful, serving as powerful objects of veneration. Yet this profound theological mystery inevitably collides with scientific scrutiny. Could natural explanations account for these states? Experts point to specific environmental conditions that can delay decay. A sealed, dry crypt with consistent temperature and good air circulation can lead to natural mummification. The type of soil, the materials of the coffin, even the presence of certain fungi or the individual's diet before death, could all contribute to a slower decomposition process. The Church itself approaches these cases with caution, conducting rigorous investigations as part of the canonization process, seeking to rule out any natural or artificial preservation. For every purported incorruptible, there are many more saintly figures who return to dust as expected. The tension between faith and science finds no easy resolution here. Are these saints preserved because of miraculous intervention, or did they, by chance or circumstance, die in a way that placed their bodies in the perfect natural laboratory for preservation? Perhaps the most intriguing possibility is a combination where an extraordinary natural event is interpreted through the lens of faith, creating a relic that inspires millions. These bodies stand at the crossroads of the tangible and the transcendent, challenging us to decide where the boundary lies between a rare natural wonder and a genuine miracle. What would it mean if the final proof of sainthood was written not in scripture, but in the very flesh that refused to fade away? But sometimes the body does not mummify or freeze. It undergoes a transformation so strange it redefines the very substance of human remains. In the late 19th century, workers expanding a Philadelphia cemetery made a discovery that defied all expectation. As they excavated an old burial vault, their shovels struck not a skeleton, but something smooth, dense, and strangely yielding. They had unearthed the Soap Lady, a woman whose body had morphed into something entirely other. Her form was grotesque and fascinating, a yellowish, waxy statue that bore only a vague resemblance to a human being. The skin had taken on the consistency of hard soap or a tallow candle, with a greasy sheen and a solid, almost sculptural quality. This was not a case of simple preservation, but of alchemy, where the chemistry of death had rewritten the rules of decay. The process that created her is known as adipose formation, or saponification. In simple terms, it is the transformation of body fat into a soap-like substance. This occurs in very specific conditions, when a body is buried in a damp, airless environment, like a waterlogged coffin or a sealed, muddy grave. In this anaerobic setting, bacteria break down the body's fats, converting them into fatty acids. These acids then react with minerals in the soil or in the body itself, forming a stable, waxy material that resists further decomposition. It is nature's way of making a permanent candle from human tissue. Yet the mystery of the soap lady is one of degree, not just kind. Adipocia forms in patches on many waterlogged remains, a greasy layer on a skeleton. But for this Philadelphia woman, the process was total and astonishingly complete. Her entire body mass was converted, creating a near-permanent, waxy effigy. Why her? Why this particular vault? The conditions had to be perfect, a precise recipe of moisture, temperature, lack of oxygen, and the chemical composition of her own tissues and the surrounding soil. Perhaps her coffin was exceptionally well sealed, trapping moisture in just the right way. Perhaps the soil in that specific plot was rich in the exact alkaline minerals needed to catalyze the reaction fully. We may never know the unique confluence of factors that singled her out for this bizarre fate. She stands as a testament to the hidden, transformative power of chemistry, a reminder that our bodies are not just destined for dust, but can, under the right forgotten circumstances, become something else entirely, a silent soapstone monument to the unpredictable science of the grave. The waxy transformation of the soap lady shows how chemistry can rewrite the body, but in one place in Sicily, the dead were curated into a permanent, silent congregation. Beneath the city of Palermo lies the crypt of the Capuchin monks, a catacomb that is less a burial site and more a macabre gallery of the past. Here, lining the corridors and resting in niches, are thousands of bodies. Some are monks, laid to rest by their brothers, but many are local elites, wealthy citizens who paid for the privilege of eternal display. They hang from the walls or recline on shelves, dressed in the finery of their era, their faces frozen in time. The air is dry and still, a natural desiccant that slowly drew moisture from the bodies, aided in many cases by a primitive form of embalming involving vinegar washes and exposure to special drying chambers. Yet, within this single, controlled environment, the results are wildly inconsistent, creating a haunting spectrum of preservation. Some figures are leathery but complete, their features stern and recognizable. Others have decayed to bare skeletons, their fine clothing draping over empty rib cages. A few have contorted into eerie, reaching poses as tendons dried and shrank, as if they died in agony or are trying to escape their niches. This variation is the crypt's central puzzle. If the environment and methods were the same, why did outcomes differ so drastically? The answer may lie in the smallest of variables. Perhaps it was a matter of individual physiology, the body fat content, the specific illnesses at death, or the speed with which the preservation process began. A body treated even a day later could have already hosted a different colony of bacteria, setting it on a path to skeletonization. Or maybe the mystery is one of microclimates. A body placed near a subtle air current from a hidden fissure in the rock might have dried perfectly, while one in a stagnant corner succumbed to mold and decay. The crypt, for all its controlled appearance, is a mosaic of tiny, unseen environments. Among this army of the dead, one figure stands apart, so perfect she seems to defy all these uncertainties. She is Rosalia Lombardo, a 2-year-old girl who died in 1920. Known as the Sleeping Beauty, she rests in a glass-covered coffin, looking for all the world as if she drifted off moments ago. Her golden curls frame a face with long eyelashes, her skin still blush pink and seemingly soft. Her preservation is so flawless, it is unnerving, achieved through a secret chemical injection formula developed by the embalmer, Alfredo Salafia. While the formula's exact recipe was lost for decades, modern scans suggest a careful balance of formalin, glycerin, and salicylic acid essentially petrified her tissues, halting decay in its tracks. Rosalia is the exception that proves the rule. Her perfect state highlights the chaotic, unpredictable, natural mummification of the thousands around her. She is a testament to human technique, while they are a testament to nature's capriciousness. Walking through the crypt is to witness a grand, unintended experiment, where the only constant is that in the quiet, dry dark, death does not wear the same face twice. Rosalia Lombardo's perfect preservation was a triumph of human science, but nature's own laboratories in the northern bogs produced mysteries far older and more enigmatic. In the peatlands of northern Germany, a different kind of young person was laid to rest, a discovery that would become tangled in mistaken identity for decades. This is the Windaby Bog body, often called the Bog Prince, though he was first believed to be a girl. His preservation tells a story of deliberate, solemn action. He was a teenager when he died, his hair shaved on one side of his head, a blindfold made of woven wool placed over his eyes. Most chillingly, he was held down in the bog by forked branches staked across his body, pinning him beneath the dark, acidic water. The initial interpretation seemed clear: a young woman punished for adultery, her shorn hair and blindfold symbols of shame. But modern science rewrote the story entirely. Detailed forensic analysis revealed the skeleton was male, and the so-called blindfold was likely a simple band that had slipped from his hair over the centuries. Yet the correction only deepened the mystery. Who was this young man, and why was he killed with such apparent ceremony? The stakes are the key. They were not haphazardly thrown atop him, but carefully placed, one across his legs and another across his upper body. This was not a body dumped in haste, but one anchored with purpose. It suggests a desire to ensure he remained submerged, to prevent him from rising or floating away. In the spiritual worldview of the Iron Age, bogs were seen as liminal spaces, gateways to the gods or the other world. Holding a body down in that sacred water could be an act of offering, a way to send a gift directly to the deities below, or it could be an act of containment, ensuring a dangerous or dishonored soul could not return to trouble the living. Was he a prince, a chosen sacrifice to appease the gods for the good of the tribe? Was he a criminal, executed and disposed of in a place of spiritual power? Or does the careful placement hint at something more personal, a ritual killing meant to bind him to that spot forever? The bog itself adds another layer of oddity. He was placed not in its deepest, most remote part, but near the edge, close to dry land. This placement feels intentional, almost as if the act was meant to be witnessed or to mark a boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the spirits. The Windaby youth is a reminder that our first assumptions are often wrong, and that the truth of these ancient deaths is written in a language of subtle physical clues we are only beginning to translate. His body, held fast by wooden stakes for 2,000 years, poses a silent question about the thin line between sacred offering and solemn punishment. Far from the damp, binding bogs of northern Europe, the desert sands of western China hold a secret that rewrites the map of ancient history. In the vast, inhospitable Taklamakan Desert, archaeologists uncovered a series of tombs, and within them, bodies so startling they seem to belong to another continent entirely. These are the Tarim mummies, and their faces tell a story no one expected. The most famous, known as the Beauty of Lulan, died nearly 4,000 years ago. Yet her high cheekbones, long nose, and reddish-brown hair are unmistakably Caucasian. She is dressed not in silks, but in finely woven woolens and a simple yet elegant felt hat. Around her, other mummies share these European features, some with men sporting full reddish beards and tall conical hats that look more at home on the steppes of Ukraine than the dunes of China. Their preservation, once again, is a gift of the environment. The Taklamakan is one of the driest places on Earth. The bodies were buried in the salty sand, which acted like a natural desiccant, pulling moisture from the tissues with ruthless efficiency. The result is a collection of individuals who look as if they passed away mere decades ago. Their eyelashes intact, the patterns on their clothing still vividly clear. But the perfectly preserved physical details only deepen the central, breathtaking mystery. What were people who looked like they came from Western Europe or the Caucasus Mountains doing in the heart of Asia over 2,000 years before the Silk Road was established? This is not a question of a single lost traveler, but of an entire community that lived, thrived, and buried their dead here for centuries. Their very existence challenges long-held narratives about the movement of ancient peoples. Were they nomadic herders from the distant West who traversed unimaginable distances? Could they represent a lost branch of an early Indo-European migration, settling in this isolated desert oasis? Their material culture offers tantalizing but ambiguous clues. They wore woven plaid twill, a technique known in Europe. They used wheels and had advanced knowledge of horse husbandry. Yet they also lived in a uniquely harsh environment, adapting to a world of extreme dryness. The biggest puzzle is their ultimate fate. Their culture, so distinct and seemingly isolated, appears to have vanished without a clear trace. Did they assimilate into the rising East Asian populations that later dominated the region? Were they wiped out by a changing climate or conflict? No written records from them have been found, so their language and names are lost to us. The Tarim mummies stand as silent, impeccably dressed envoys from a forgotten world, their presence a stubborn fact that refuses to fit neatly into our history books. They force us to reconsider the ancient world as a place of astonishing, long-distance connections and migrations we are only beginning to uncover. Who were these Western people of the Eastern Desert, and what stories did they carry with them that were ultimately buried beneath the relentless sand? The Tarim mummies speak of ancient, forgotten journeys, but another young girl was placed on a journey of a very different kind, a final, sacred ascent into the sky. In September 1995, an American anthropologist named Johann Reinhard was climbing Mount Ampato, a dormant volcano in the Peruvian Andes, when he noticed a strange bundle near the summit, partially exposed by melting ice. Inside, he found a girl frozen in time. She was only about 12 to 14 years old, her body curled in a peaceful, sleeping position, her face remarkably serene. They named her Juanita, the Ice Maiden of the Andes, and she was a sacrifice to the Inca gods, left on the mountain over 500 years ago. Her preservation is breathtaking. She is not a skeleton, but a complete individual. Her skin is still supple, her internal organs intact, her long black hair braided. She was dressed for her sacred role in a magnificent tunic of vivid crimson, a delicate yellow shawl draped over her shoulders, and a headdress of silver and feathers. Beside her were small gold and silver figurines, a collection of shells, and a pouch of coca leaves, offerings meant to accompany her into the afterlife. The combination of elements that saved her is as precise as a lock. First, the altitude. At over 20,000 feet, the air is thin and freezing, a natural deep freeze. Second, the volcanic ash. A recent eruption from a nearby volcano had covered the summit in a layer of fine ash, which insulated her body like a blanket, protecting it from sublimation, the process where ice turns directly to vapor in the dry, high-altitude air. The ash and perpetual ice worked together, creating a sealed, frozen tomb that remained undisturbed for centuries. But the greatest mystery wrapped around Juanita is not how she was preserved, but why she was chosen. Inca child sacrifices, known as capacocha, were not acts of cruelty, but the ultimate offerings. The children selected were considered pure and perfect, often from noble families, chosen to be messengers to the gods. They were treated with immense reverence, fed a special diet, and taken on a long pilgrimage to the mountain peaks, which the Incas believed brought them closer to the sun god, Inti. Juanita's pristine state tells us her death was likely quick, perhaps from a single blow to the head, after which she was carefully arranged with her precious artifacts. Yet the question remains, what made this particular girl the chosen one? Was it her lineage, a dream interpreted by priests, or a celestial sign? Her preservation also acts as a climatic time capsule. The fact that she remained frozen and untouched for 500 years reveals a stable, cold environment that suddenly changed only recently with the melting of Ampato's ice cap. Her discovery itself is a direct result of modern climate change, the warming temperatures that melted her icy tomb and returned her to the world. She is a messenger twice over, first to the gods and now to us, a silent witness to a sacred ritual and a stark indicator of a shifting planet. What did she think? Looking out from her litter on that final climb towards the summit, dressed in her finest clothes, unaware that her body would become a perfect, frozen testament to faith and a changing world. While Juanita was a sacred offering to the gods, another body was preserved for a very different kind of worship. In the heart of Moscow's Red Square, inside a granite mausoleum, lies a man who died in 1924. Vladimir Lenin, the revolutionary leader of the Soviet Union, appears to rest in a state of suspended animation. His hands are peacefully at his sides, his famous beard and mustache neatly trimmed, his skin possessing a waxy, lifelike pallor. For over a century, he has been on public display, a political icon made physically permanent. This is not an accident of nature, but one of the most ambitious and secretive scientific projects of the 20th century, a deliberate battle against decay waged in the name of ideology. The goal was not just to preserve a body, but to preserve a symbol, to make the flesh and blood leader into an eternal, tangible monument. The initial challenge was immense. Lenin died in January, the Russian winter providing a temporary reprieve, but within weeks, the first signs of discoloration and decomposition began to appear. A special commission of scientists was formed under immense pressure from the state, tasked with achieving the impossible. They succeeded not through one method, but through a complex, ongoing regimen that is part embalming, part restoration, and part theatrical illusion. The core process, developed by biochemist Boris Zbarsky and his team, involves periodically immersing the body in a bath of preservative solutions. These solutions are believed to contain a mix of chemicals like glycerin to prevent drying, potassium acetate as an antibacterial agent, and quinine to combat fungi. The body's cavities are treated, and the skin is meticulously rehydrated and touched up with subtle dyes. Every 18 months, Lenin is taken to a secret laboratory beneath the mausoleum for a weeks-long immersion and treatment, a ritual of renewal that has continued without fail for generations. Yet the precise formulas and techniques remain a closely guarded state secret, known only to a small team at the Center for Scientific Research and Teaching Methods in Biochemical Technologies. This secrecy is the central, enduring puzzle. We understand the broad principles, the need to replace fluids with preservatives, to maintain humidity, to control microbial growth. But the exact chemical cocktail, the concentrations, the timing, and the delicate art of subcutaneous injection and cosmetic upkeep are mysteries. How have they perfectly prevented the inevitable shrinkage, distortion, or discoloration that plagues even the best modern embalming? Some speculate the solutions include rare, stabilizing isotopes or proprietary polymers. Others point to the microclimate of the sealed, glass-topped casket, maintained at a constant 16 degrees Celsius and 65% humidity, as a critical component. The result is a preservation that feels unnervingly successful, a scientific marvel that also serves as a powerful political tool, creating the illusion that the revolutionary himself is still present, watching over the state he founded. It prompts a profound question about the line between science and symbolism. Is Lenin's body a triumph of biochemistry, or is it the ultimate piece of political theater, a carefully maintained relic designed to project an image of unwavering power and permanence long after the man and his ideology have passed into history? His throat was cut from ear to ear. The Graubaal man, discovered in a Danish peat bog in 1952, is an image of shocking violence frozen in time. His body lies twisted, his head thrown back, a deep, fatal gash slicing cleanly across his neck. Yet, like the Tolland man found just miles away, his face holds a strange tranquility. His hair and stubble are a striking reddish blonde, his skin tanned a deep, leathery brown by the bog's acids. The forensic details of his death are chillingly precise. There are no defensive wounds on his hands or arms, suggesting he did not struggle against his attackers. Perhaps his hands were bound, or perhaps he was rendered unconscious first. His last meal, preserved in his stomach, was a simple gruel made from over 60 different types of grains, seeds, and weeds, a desperate, gritty fare that speaks of scarcity. This mundane final supper is a critical clue. It points not to a feast before a sacred offering, but to a meal of last resort, eaten during a time of famine or poor harvest. The combination of his violent, bloodletting death and his humble last meal has led many scholars to a powerful conclusion. The Graubaal man may have been a king for a day, a chosen sacrifice of the highest order. In times of ecological crisis, a failed harvest, a prolonged winter, a creeping famine, Iron Age societies might have turned to the ultimate bargain. The life of a strong, perhaps noble individual could be offered to the gods of the earth and fertility in exchange for the community's survival. His slit throat would ensure a copious flow of blood, a potent liquid offering returned directly to the bog, which was itself seen as a sacred, generative place. His lack of struggle could then be interpreted not as weakness, but as acceptance, a willing death for the greater good. Yet this compelling story is shadowed by a scientific puzzle. Why does he look so different from his neighbor, the Tolland man? Both men died around the same time in the same region, preserved by the same type of environment. But where the Tolland man's skin is smooth and fine-featured, the Graubaal man's is coarser, more eroded and darker. The answer lies in the bog's unique hyper-local chemistry. No two patches of peat are identical. The specific balance of water, acidity, plant matter, and minerals in the Graubaal bog was slightly different. It may have been warmer or more saturated with certain tannins. This microenvironment tanned his skin more aggressively, giving it that rougher, darker texture. It is a reminder that these bodies are not just historical artifacts, but products of a specific, almost alchemical point in the landscape. The Graubaal man forces us to hold two ideas at once. He is both an individual who ate a poor meal and met a brutal end, and a potential symbol of an entire community's hope and desperation. Was he a criminal executed and dumped, or a volunteer walking solemnly into the bog to save his people? The perfect preservation of his body gives us every physical detail, yet it steadfastly refuses to tell us the one thing we most want to know, the expression in his eyes in the moments before the blade was drawn. The brutal, sacrificial death of the Graubaal man speaks of a community's external plea to the gods, but another form of preservation began as the most internal of journeys, a quest for enlightenment so absolute it transcended the body itself. In 2014, researchers in the Netherlands performed a routine CT scan on a Chinese Buddhist statue dating to the 11th or 12th century. The imaging was meant to reveal its internal structure, perhaps a wooden armature or old repairs. Instead, the screen displayed a breathtaking and macabre truth. Sitting in the perfect lotus position inside the statue was a complete human skeleton surrounded by bundles of paper covered in ancient Chinese characters. This was not a relic placed inside an artifact, but a mummified monk, his body itself forming the sacred core of the sculpture. The details were astonishing. The monk's organs had been carefully removed, and his thoracic cavity was packed with rolls of paper inscribed with prayers. His body was seated in deep meditation, a posture he may have held in life and maintained through death. The immediate chilling theory points to an extreme act of devotion known as self-mummification. In Japan, a related practice called sokushin butsu was pursued by monks of the Shugendo tradition for centuries. The process was a grueling, years-long ritual. A monk would enter a period of extreme asceticism, adopting a special diet of nuts, seeds, and tree bark to strip his body of all fat and moisture, making it an inhospitable environment for bacteria. In the final stage, he would enter a small underground stone chamber connected to the surface by a bamboo air tube. Seated in meditation, he would ring a bell each day to signal he was still alive. When the bell finally fell silent, his followers would seal the tomb for 3 years, then open it. If the body was found incorrupt, it was venerated as a living Buddha, a sokushin butsu. If it had decayed, it was respectfully reburied with honors for the attempt. The mummy inside the Chinese statue bears the hallmarks of this terrifying dedication, but here the historical trail goes cold, creating a deeper mystery. While self-mummification is documented in Japan, records of such a practice in China are virtually non-existent. This glaring absence forces a difficult question. Did this monk undertake a secret, solitary version of the Sokushin Butsu ritual, achieving a state of perfect preservation through unimaginable willpower, only for his followers to later enshrine him within the statue? Or is the sequence of events entirely reversed? Could this be the mummy of a revered monk who died naturally and was then expertly mummified by his community, his remains carefully inserted into a pre-existing statue to honor him as a living icon? Without any written account of his life or death, we are left with 2 equally profound possibilities. He could be an ultimate ascetic, a man who so mastered his physical form that he turned his own body into a permanent vessel for meditation. Or he could be the centerpiece of an elaborate posthumous veneration, a physical relic sanctifying a work of art. The papers crammed inside his chest might hold the answer, but their delicate, compacted state makes them nearly impossible to read without causing destruction. So he sits in silent paradox, a teacher whose very form is a koan. Is the statue a shell built around a saint, or is the saint the Sacred Heart placed inside a shell? His perfect meditative pose offers no clue, leaving us to wonder whether we are looking at the culmination of a lifelong prayer or a beautiful, mysterious tomb. The mummified monk achieved preservation through an act of profound will, but the natural world has produced its own accidental masterpieces on a scale that dwarfs human history. We must travel back 77 million years to meet Leonardo, a dinosaur who defies the very definition of a fossil. Discovered in Montana in the year 2000, Leonardo is not a mere skeleton. He is a Brachylophosaurus, a duck-billed dinosaur found with over 90% of his body covered in fossilized skin, scales, and muscle tissue. His throat pouch is visible. The patterns on his hide are distinct, and scientists have even analyzed the contents of his last meal, identifying ferns, magnolia leaves, and pollen grains. This is not a stone cast of a creature, but a near-perfect 3-dimensional preservation of the animal itself, a condition so rare it has earned the title of a dinosaur mummy. The process that saved Leonardo from total dissolution is a breathtakingly precise sequence of natural disasters. First, death had to be followed by immediate and rapid burial. Picture a riverbank collapsing in a flash flood, or a sudden, catastrophic sandstorm. Leonardo was likely engulfed in a torrent of fine, waterlogged sediment, perhaps after dying near a river. This quick entombment shielded his body from scavengers and from the oxygen that fuels rapid decay. But burial alone is not enough. The sediment itself had to be chemically perfect, creating an anaerobic, oxygen-free environment that halted bacterial breakdown. Furthermore, the chemistry likely leaned alkaline, which can promote the mineralization of soft tissues, essentially turning skin and muscle into stone from the inside out before they could rot. The sediment acted like a mold, and the minerals that seeped in became the casting material, petrifying his form in exquisite detail. This leads to the monumental mystery hanging over Leonardo and the few other dinosaur mummies like him. What specific apocalyptic event occurred that was so swift, so complete, and so chemically ideal? A normal flood might bury a body, but not with the uniform speed and fine sediment needed to preserve a throat pouch. A sandstorm might cover a carcass, but not necessarily in the waterlogged anaerobic conditions that safeguard stomach contents for eons. The event had to be a perfect storm of geology and tragedy. A sudden underwater mudslide, perhaps, or a collapsing dune field saturated with mineral-rich water. It was a catastrophe so finely tuned that it captured a moment of Cretaceous life with photographic fidelity, locking away soft tissues that conventional wisdom insisted could never survive the march of millions of years. Leonardo's existence forces paleontologists to reconsider the fossilization process itself. We once believed only bones and teeth could endure, with rare impressions of skin. But these mummies prove that under just the right, freakish circumstances, the entire package could be saved. Here's a time capsule of unimaginable luck, challenging us to ask what other wonders of flesh and form might be waiting in the stone, preserved by ancient disasters we have yet to fully comprehend. The mineral-rich chemistry that preserved a dinosaur's last meal finds a strange, smaller-scale echo in the crypts of a quiet Italian town. In Venzone, a medieval village nestled in the foothills of the Alps, the dead did not rest in peace. They underwent a startling transformation. Interred in the cool stone crypts beneath the town's cathedral, bodies would, within a single year, become leathery, lightweight mummies. Their skin darkened to a deep umber, pulled taut over bone, yet their features remained hauntingly recognizable. This was not a slow, centuries-long process like in Palermo, but a swift and reliable metamorphosis, creating a collection known simply as the Venzone mummies. For generations, this was simply the way of things in Venzone, a local fact of life and death so accepted that the mummies were periodically redressed by their living relatives. The phenomenon created a macabre archive of the town's history, with figures from nobles to peasants preserved side by side, their faces telling silent stories of the past. Yet this reliable process held a central scientific riddle. Why did it happen here, and nowhere else in the region with similar climate and architecture? The answer, when it began to emerge, pointed to a bizarre and specific biological agent. Researchers identified a unique fungus, Hypha tombicina, thriving in the particular environment of the limestone tombs. This was not a fungus of decay, but one of preservation. The theory is fascinating. The limestone walls of the crypts, combined with the area's specific air circulation and stable, cool temperature, created a perfect incubator for this rare organism. As a body was interred, the Hypha tombicina would quickly colonize it, but instead of consuming the tissues, the fungus acted with a kind of paradoxical efficiency. It rapidly desiccated the body, sucking out all moisture at an incredible speed. This left the tissues leathery and intact, halting bacterial decomposition before it could even begin. The mummy was essentially freeze-dried by fungal activity. This explains the astonishing speed, but it deepens the mystery of locality. Why did this precise combination, this specific fungus in this specific limestone with this specific airflow, only exist in Venzone's crypts. It was a perfect, self-contained ecosystem for mummification. And then the phenomenon simply stopped. After the 19th century, no new mummies were created. The most likely culprit is a change in the tomb's microenvironment. Earthquakes, renovations to the cathedral foundations, or even shifts in burial practices could have altered the delicate balance of humidity, temperature, or airflow. Without its perfect habitat, the Hypha tombicina fungus likely died out or became inactive. The preserved mummies remain, but the natural factory that created them fell silent. This makes the Venzone collection a closed chapter, a snapshot of a time when a town's crypts were host to a unique and fleeting partnership between architecture, climate, and a strange preservative mold. It prompts us to consider how many other local miracles of nature have vanished unnoticed, their conditions altered by the slow, inexorable changes of the modern world. The unique fungal ecosystem of Venzone preserved a community, but one single, ornate coffin in America safeguarded a solitary boy. In 2005, construction workers in Washington, D.C. were preparing a site for a new university building when their backhoe struck something unyielding. Buried just 3 feet below the modern city was a heavy, hexagonal iron coffin. When archaeologists carefully opened the sealed lid, they were met with a sight that stopped time. Inside lay a young African-American boy, perhaps 13 years old, dressed in a fine linen shirt and jacket. His skin was still intact, his facial features peaceful and clear, his body perfectly preserved from the moment he was laid to rest over a century and a half earlier. This was not a mummy in the traditional sense, but a pristine snapshot from the 1850s, saved by a remarkable feat of 19th century engineering. The coffin itself was the key. It was a Fisk metallic burial case, a patented design meant to protect the deceased from grave robbers and the elements. Crafted from cast iron, it was fitted with a glass viewing plate over the face and, most importantly, a rubber gasket that created an airtight seal when the lid was screwed shut. Once interred, the oxygen inside the small chamber was quickly consumed by the natural processes of decay. This created a completely anaerobic environment, a vacuum-sealed tomb where bacteria that require oxygen to break down tissue were swiftly suffocated. The process halted decomposition almost immediately, leaving the boy and his clothing in a state of suspended animation. While the science of his preservation is elegantly clear, the mystery of his identity is profound. Who was this young man? His clothing was of good quality, and the Fisk coffin was an expensive, cutting-edge item for its time, a symbol of status and care. This was not a pauper's burial. Historical records and painstaking research eventually gave him a name: William Taylor White, a student from the nearby Columbia Institution for the Deaf and Dumb. We learned he died of lobar pneumonia in 1852. Yet the deeper questions persist. How did his family, in an era of profound racial inequality and just a decade before the Civil War, afford such an elaborate burial? Was his family part of Washington's small, prosperous community of free black citizens? Or did the institution itself, or perhaps a benefactor, provide the coffin for a beloved student? The iron coffin preserved his physical form with clinical perfection, but it locked away the social story. We can see the careful part in his hair, the neat tailoring of his suit, but we cannot see the grief of his parents or the circumstances that allowed for this final, protective gesture. He becomes a paradox, a young boy from a marginalized community granted a burial technology of the elite, his body saved by iron and rubber, while the full narrative of his life was slowly erased by time. His preservation is a triumph of industrial ingenuity, but his story is a haunting reminder of the countless personal histories that lie just beneath the surface, waiting for a backhoe's blade, or an archaeologist's careful hand to bring them back into the light. The iron coffin of William White was a sealed vessel against time, but some deaths seem to defy the laws of physics entirely. Throughout history, reports surface of a phenomenon so bizarre it feels ripped from fiction. An individual is found almost completely reduced to a pile of greasy ash, perhaps a single unburned foot or a fragment of skull resting untouched amidst the cinders. Yet the chair they were sitting in is only lightly scorched. The surrounding room shows no signs of a spreading fire, and the air holds no smell of smoke. This is the enigma of alleged spontaneous human combustion. Classic cases read like macabre riddles. In 1951, a Florida woman named Mary Reeser was discovered in her apartment. All that remained was a shrunken skull, a spinal column, and one foot still wearing its slipper, resting in a circle of charred carpet. The nearby curtains and a pile of newspapers were untouched. Decades earlier, in 1967, the body of a pensioner named Robert Bailey was found similarly incinerated in his boarding house room, with a small, neat hole burned through the floorboards directly beneath him, but no other structural damage. The most common scientific explanation offered is the so-called wick effect, or candle theory. It proposes that a small external ignition source, a dropped cigarette, a spark from a hearth, first sets the victim's clothing alight. If the person is incapacitated by alcohol, medication, or a medical event, they cannot react. The burning clothing then melts the subcutaneous body fat, which soaks into the fabric like the wax in a candle wick. This fat then fuels a slow, intense, and remarkably localized fire that can burn for hours, consuming the body's soft tissues and even bones, which are rich in fat, while the lack of moving air or flammable materials nearby contains the blaze to the immediate vicinity of the body. It is a gruesome, self-sustaining biological furnace. Yet this theory, while compelling, leaves a profound and unsettling gap. It explains the fuel and the containment, but it struggles with the initial spark. In many of the most famous cases, no plausible external ignition source was ever identified. No lit cigarettes, no overturned heaters, no faulty wiring. If the wick effect is the process, what is the definitive match? Why does this happen with such extreme rarity and seemingly to individuals who are often elderly, solitary, or in poor health? Some researchers speculate about internal biochemical triggers, a buildup of ketones or gases within the body that could, theoretically, ignite under specific, unknown conditions. But no such mechanism has ever been proven in a living human. The mystery is compounded by the bizarre, partial preservation often noted. A perfectly intact foot, a hand, or a skull fragment will survive the inferno untouched. This selective survival is sometimes attributed to the body's position, with limbs tucked away from the main fuel source, but it adds to the surreal, almost curated appearance of the scene. In a strange, horrific sense, these remains are preserved by the very ferocity of their destruction, reduced to a few iconic fragments that become the sole physical evidence of a life ended by a fire that, by all conventional understanding, should not have happened. The phenomenon forces a difficult choice between two possibilities. Is spontaneous human combustion a genuine, if freakishly rare, natural event whose trigger we have yet to discover, a hidden flaw in our own biological chemistry? Or is it simply a collection of tragic, ordinary fires where the wick effect created such an unusual pattern of destruction that it appears supernatural? The ash and the surviving foot offer no verdict, leaving us to wonder if the human body itself can, under the perfect storm of neglect and physiology, become its own funeral pyre. The eerie, selective preservation of the Andean ice maiden was a sacred act, but high on another mountain, the same merciless cold bore witness to a desperate struggle for survival that tested every boundary of human endurance. In October 1972, a chartered flight carrying 45 people, including a Uruguayan rugby team, crashed in the remote Andes. The initial impact was catastrophic, Yet 28 passengers survived, stranded on a glacier at an altitude of over 11,000 feet. As days turned to weeks in a frozen hell, their food ran out, injuries festered, and hope dwindled. Facing starvation, the survivors made an agonizing decision, one that would later define the tragedy in the public mind. They resorted to cannibalism, consuming the flesh of their deceased friends to stay alive. This act of desperation, born of unimaginable circumstance, ultimately allowed 16 people to endure for 72 days until rescue. Yet, layered within this harrowing tale of survival is another, quieter mystery of preservation, one dictated by the glacier's indifferent logic. The deceased passengers, those killed on impact or who later succumbed to injuries, did not simply vanish. The mountain became their tomb, and the conditions on that specific slope created a bizarre, inconsistent laboratory. The bodies of the deceased, initially laid in the snow or sheltered in the fuselage, were subject to a cruel and unpredictable lottery. Some individuals, buried by fresh snowfall or lying in deep, shaded crevasses, were flash frozen. The dry, sub-zero air acted like a vacuum, sublimating moisture from their tissues and leaving them in a state of suspended animation, not unlike the Inca Ice Maiden. Their skin hardened, their features fixed, preserved with a grim clarity by the deep cold. They became accidental ice mummies, locked in the posture of their final moments. Others, however, underwent a horrifyingly different process. A body left exposed on a sun-facing patch of the wreckage, even in the freezing air, could be subjected to intense solar radiation. The thin atmosphere offered little protection, and the sun's rays, reflected and amplified by the endless white snow, could cause localized thawing. This cycle of daytime thaw and nighttime refreeze, coupled with the abrasive action of wind-driven ice crystals, led to rapid deterioration. Tissues could become discolored, mummified in a leathery, distorted way, or even suffer from a form of freeze-drying that left them brittle and fragmented. Furthermore, the glacier itself was a living, shifting entity. A body carefully placed in a snow cave one week could be churned and crushed by a slow-moving ice flow the next, or partially exposed by a shifting snowdrift, leaving it vulnerable to the elements and scavenging birds. The result was a macabre patchwork on the mountainside, a map of microenvironments with no clear pattern. Two friends lying mere feet apart could undergo radically different transformations based solely on the angle of a rock, the depth of a drift, or the whims of the wind. This inconsistency is the glacier's silent scientific lesson. It demonstrates that preservation is never a single monolithic force, but a fragile negotiation between a body and its immediate, inch-by-inch surroundings. For the survivors, the state of the deceased was a daily, heartbreaking reality, a factor in their agonizing calculations. The mountain was not a uniform preserver. It was a capricious curator, deciding by chance alone which faces would remain recognizable and which would be reclaimed by the brutal processes of the high altitude. This grim variation forces us to look beyond the overwhelming narrative of survival and see the crash site for what it also was, a natural experiment in decomposition where the variables of sun, shadow, snow, and stone wrote a different ending for every soul lost. The capricious lottery of the Andean Glacier preserved some and ravaged others, but one tiny body in the American West achieved a different kind of notoriety, wrapped in layers of spectacle and sorrow. In a glass case at a Wyoming casino for decades, visitors could gawk at a bizarre relic known as the Mummy of San Pedro. The figure is shockingly small, only about 6 inches tall, sitting cross-legged with its arms folded. Its skin is a dark, leathery brown, pulled tight over a skull, with a dramatically sloping forehead and deep, hollow eye sockets. Its mouth is slightly open, giving it an eternal, silent cry. For years, wild stories swirled around it, promoted by sideshow promoters and tabloids. Some claimed it was the mummy of a Native American pygmy, a lost race of little people. Others, tapping into mid-century flying saucer fever, insisted its strange features were proof positive it was an alien, a visitor from another world preserved in the high desert. This sensational lore, however, obscures a much more probable and human truth. Forensic anthropologists who have examined the remains believe the San Pedro mummy was almost certainly an encephalic infant. Anencephaly is a severe birth defect where a baby is born without major portions of the brain, skull, and scalp. The condition results in the distinctive sloping forehead and facial structure seen in the mummy. In earlier times, such infants were often stillborn or died shortly after birth, and their unusual appearance could easily fuel myths and fearful speculation. The real mystery, therefore, is not its origin, but its endurance. How did such a fragile, pathological specimen become so completely mummified? Anencephalic infants have severe cranial defects. Their remains are incredibly delicate. Natural mummification typically requires a very specific set of environmental conditions, extreme dryness, consistent temperature, and good air circulation to draw out moisture before decay can begin. The American West has arid regions, but achieving this level of preservation for something so small and vulnerable is remarkably rare. It would have needed to be placed in a perfectly dry, sheltered niche, perhaps a cave or a sealed rock crevice, almost immediately after death. Yet here, the historical trail vanishes entirely. The mummy lacks any documented archaeological context. It was reportedly found by gold prospectors in the Pedro Mountains in the 1930s, but no precise location was recorded, no burial goods were noted, and no associated artifacts were found. Its preservation history is a complete blank. Was it a tragic birth quietly placed in a sacred cave by grieving parents? Was it simply lost and sheltered by a freakish coincidence of geology? We have no way of knowing. The casino display case removed it from any environment that could provide clues, sealing it in a different kind of tomb, one of curiosity and commerce. Its preservation stands as a quiet, sobering counterpoint to the loud alien myths. It is most likely a tiny human tragedy, accidentally saved by the desert's dry breath, then forever framed as a monster. This asks us a difficult question about how we choose to see the past. Do we look for the miraculous and the extraterrestrial, or do we see the fragile human story waiting silently beneath the leathery skin? Beneath the alien myths surrounding the San Pedro mummy lies a tangible human story, yet some sites transform human remains into something beyond story altogether. In the small Czech town of Kutna Hora, there exists a chapel unlike any other. The Sedlec ossuary is famously adorned with the bones of between 40 and 70,000 people, artistically arranged into chandeliers, coats of arms, and even a monstrous chandelier containing every bone in the human body. But long before this macabre artistry began, the cemetery soil itself held a bizarre and potent secret. According to historical records from the Middle Ages, bodies interred here did not follow the normal path of decay. Instead, they underwent a rapid, startling mummification. The local soil, rich in specific minerals from the surrounding silver mines, seemed to possess a mysterious preservative quality. It was said that a body buried in the morning could show signs of this transformation by evening, the flesh desiccating at an unnatural speed, leaving behind a leathery, intact form. This strange property made the cemetery ground holy and incredibly sought after. People from across Central Europe desired burial here, believing the soil's action was a divine sign, a guarantee of bodily integrity for the resurrection. The demand was so immense that the cemetery had to be expanded repeatedly, and when space finally ran out, the older graves were exhumed to make room for the newly deceased. This practice of bone storage is what ultimately created the vast collection that the ossuary artists would later use. The soil did not just preserve bodies, it generated an endless supply of skeletal remains. The central scientific puzzle is the specific chemistry of that earth. What exactly was in the soil that acted as such a powerful, rapid desiccant? The leading theory points to the area's history of silver mining. The excavation and processing of silver ore can leave behind high concentrations of heavy metals like arsenic, lead, and zinc in the surrounding earth. These elements are toxic to the bacteria and fungi that drive decomposition. A body buried in soil saturated with such antimicrobial agents would be essentially pickled from the outside in, its tissues stabilized before rot could take hold. Yet this explanation, while logical, remains an educated guess. The unexplained element is the sheer reported speed and efficacy of the process, which seems almost legendary. Furthermore, this preservative property appears to have faded over the centuries. Modern analysis of the soil does not reveal the same potent cocktail, likely diluted by time, weather, and changes in land use. Were the medieval reports exaggerated, or has the Earth truly lost its strange power? Scientists are left to reconstruct a lost environmental recipe from historical anecdotes, trying to pinpoint the exact mineral blend that once turned a humble churchyard into one of the most powerful natural mummification sites in Europe. The ossuary stands today as a monument to this forgotten alchemy, a chapel built from the physical consequence of soil that could stop time. The soil of Sedlec ossuary held a preservative power, but nature possesses an even more transformative alchemy, one that turns flesh into literal stone. Beyond mummification or freezing lies the phenomenon of petrification, where the very substance of a body is replaced, molecule by molecule, with minerals. This process, known as permineralization, is the secret behind most dinosaur fossils, where silica or calcite from groundwater slowly infiltrates porous bone, crystallizing within the cellular structure and turning it to stone while preserving its shape. For bones, this is remarkable, but understood. The true, profound mystery occurs when this mineral replacement claims not just bone, but soft tissue, skin, muscle, even internal organs. These are the petrified corpses, human bodies that have crossed the line from organic remains to geological artifacts. Imagine a body coming to rest in an environment saturated with mineral-rich water, perhaps near a volcanic hot spring or in a cave dripping with dissolved silica. The water, carrying a heavy load of minerals like silica or calcium carbonate, begins to seep into the tissues. If the flow is constant but very slow and the temperature and chemistry are precisely balanced, a miraculous exchange can begin. As the organic material of the cells slowly decays, the minerals precipitate out of the water, filling the microscopic voids left behind. This isn't a coating, but a perfect three-dimensional replacement. The cell walls themselves become a template for a stone cast. Over centuries, the entire body can be transformed, its flesh and bone replaced with a durable, stony replica that captures even the finest wrinkles, fingerprints, and folds of clothing. The result is a statue of a person, not carved by human hands, but sculpted by the patient, mineral-laden drip of water through stone. Yet for all the clarity of the process, credible, well-documented cases of fully petrified human bodies are vanishingly rare. This scarcity is the core of the puzzle. The conditions required are not just rare, they are almost impossibly specific. The mineral content of the water must be exceptionally high, but not so high that it simply coats the body in a crust, sealing it off from further infiltration. The flow must be consistent over hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, a trickle, not a flood. The environment must remain stable, free from geological disturbance or drastic climate shifts that would alter the water's chemistry or direction. The body itself likely needs to be in a position that allows for even exposure, perhaps lying in a shallow pool of this super-saturated solution. Any deviation from this perfect recipe, and the process fails. The body decomposes normally or becomes a misshapen lump of mineral deposit. This explains why most alleged petrified corpses from folklore or sideshows are often revealed to be clever carvings or natural rock formations that bear a coincidental resemblance to a human form. A genuine, scientifically verified example would be a treasure of unimaginable value, a snapshot of human anatomy frozen in stone. It would require an undisturbed, mineral-rich tomb that functioned with the consistency of a laboratory for millennia. Perhaps such a body rests undiscovered in a remote cave system or beneath the cinder terraces of a forgotten hot spring. The petrified corpse represents the ultimate convergence of the human and the geological, a being that has truly become part of the earth. It asks us to consider the deepest scales of time, where the slow whisper of water and stone can perform a meticulous, mineral-driven resurrection, creating a witness that is no longer flesh and blood, but a permanent echo in rock. The petrified corpse becomes one with the earth, but another tradition sought to reconnect heaven and earth through the bones of the holy dead. Across Catholic Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries, a remarkable and macabre art form flourished. These were the catacomb saints, skeletons of early Christian martyrs, exhumed from the Roman catacombs, then lavishly dressed and adorned as if they were alive and attending a celestial ball. Their skulls might be crowned with tiaras of gold and gemstones, their finger bones fitted with delicate rings, their rib cages draped in gowns of the finest silk and lace. They were posed in glass-sided shrines, often holding a symbol of their martyrdom, a palm frond, a miniature sword, their empty eye sockets gazing out from faces, sometimes covered in delicate wax masks. While these bodies were not preserved in any biological sense, they represent an entirely different kind of puzzle, one of identity, belief, and the human desire to make the sacred tangible. The central swirling mystery is a simple one. Who were they, really? The labels affixed to their cases bore names like Saint Clementius or Saint Valentinus, but these identities were assigned centuries after their deaths, based on little more than a fragment of parchment found near the bones or the hopeful interpretation of a symbol painted on a catacomb wall. In the fervor of the Counter-Reformation, there was a tremendous demand for physical relics to strengthen the faith of the people and to counter the rise of Protestantism. The catacombs provided a seemingly endless supply of anonymous ancient bones. The verification process was often more devotional than forensic. A church would request a martyr's body from Rome, and agents would enter the labyrinthine tunnels to select a suitable skeleton. The mere fact that the bones were found in the catacombs, ancient Christian burial sites, was often proof enough of martyrdom. The real transformation and the true preservation puzzle began after selection. Once a skeleton was chosen, it was entrusted to nuns, often in Swiss and German convents, who undertook the sacred task of ornamentation. They would painstakingly wire each bone together, then sew the figure into sumptuous clothing, often donating their own jewelry and finest needlework to adorn the saint. This intricate, years-long process was an act of profound veneration, a literal re-embodiment of a holy person through craft and devotion. The skeletons, through this lavish attention, were preserved not from decay, but from obscurity. They were made incorruptible in the cultural memory, their anonymity clothed in specificity, their silence given a name and a story. The allure of these bejeweled corpses lies in this stark, beautiful contradiction. They are simultaneously genuine, ancient human remains and elaborate fictions, collective works of art built upon a foundation of bone. They preserved not tissue, but the idea of sainthood itself, giving a physical form to faith that congregations could see and touch. In a world that often feels disconnected from the spiritual, these saints offered a glittering, if unsettling, bridge. What does it mean when we dress the anonymous dead in the costumes of heroes, assigning them names and histories lost to time? The catacomb? Saints answer not with science, but with a powerful human truth. Sometimes we preserve what we need most, crafting eternity from memory, wire, and precious stones. The bejeweled saints of the catacombs were preserved by human hands, but the bogs of Ireland hold a body whose preservation was an act of pure, ancient violence. Cashel Man is not just another bog body. He is Ireland's oldest, a figure from the early Bronze Age who died over 4,000 years ago. His discovery was as modern as his death was ancient, unearthed in 2011 by a milling machine cutting peat for fuel. The machine's blades sliced through his leg, a brutal introduction to a man who had already endured unimaginable trauma. His body tells a story of systematic destruction. His arm was broken, his spine shattered, and deep cuts scored his back. The force was so extreme that some researchers believe he may have been literally broken over a rock or a wooden bar, a form of execution known as breaking on the wheel, but millennia before that practice was recorded in medieval Europe. The bog's cold, acidic embrace performed its familiar magic, tanning his skin to leather and halting decay, but it could not soften the story of his final moments. This preservation is itself a deeper scientific marvel. For a body to survive intact for over 4,000 years, the bog's chemistry had to be perfect from the very day he was placed in it. The water needed just the right balance of acidity and tannins. The sphagnum moss had to create its oxygen-free barrier immediately, and the body had to sink into an undisturbed, stable layer of peat. This consistency over 40 centuries is astonishing, suggesting that some bogs are not just random graves, but remarkably stable natural archives, their preservative properties locked in for millennia. Yet for all the clarity of his injuries, the ritual context of his death is utterly lost to us. The violence is too specific, too methodical to be mere murder. This was a killing with a purpose. A message written in broken bone. Was he a failed king, sacrificed after a poor harvest? A criminal receiving a punishment meant to cripple his spirit in the afterlife? Or was the breaking of his body a symbolic act, meant to release something or bind him to the bog forever? Unlike later Iron Age bog bodies who sometimes have last meals or personal items, Cashel Man offers no such clues. He arrives from the deep past as a pure, brutal question. His exceptional age adds another layer of mystery. He lived in a time when metal was new and precious, a world of emerging chieftains and distant trade. His death pushes the practice of ritual bog killing back over 1,000 years earlier than we previously thought, suggesting this was not a brief cultural phase, but a tradition with incredibly deep roots. What does it mean that such violent ceremonial execution spans such an immense stretch of time? Cashel Man's preserved form is a bridge to a shadowy epoch, a single terrible moment that has lasted longer than most civilizations. He forces us to wonder what other ancient witnesses still lie beneath the damp, dark turf, waiting for a machine's blade or a researcher's careful trowel to bring their 4,000-year-old testimony back into the light. The brutal breaking of Cashel Man was an act of external violence, but the ultimate mastery over decay may require a violence turned inward, a discipline of the flesh so extreme it borders on the supernatural. In the misty mountains of Yamagata Prefecture, Japan, a small number of Buddhist monks achieved what seems impossible. They became living Buddhas, or Sokushinbutsu, through a horrifying process of self-mummification. This was not a passive preservation by bog or ice, but an active, agonizing pursuit of enlightenment that used the body itself as the final offering. The journey began with a diet called mokujikigyo, the tree-eating practice. For 1,000 days, a monk would survive only on nuts, seeds, berries, and the bark of pine trees, stripping his body of all fat. For another 1,000 days, his diet became even more severe, limited to a small amount of bark and roots. This starvation regimen served a dual purpose. It eliminated the body fat that would putrefy after death, and it removed all moisture, creating a desiccated, inhospitable environment for bacteria. In the final stage, the monk would enter a small underground stone chamber, barely large enough to sit in lotus position. A narrow bamboo tube provided minimal air. With a bell in his hand, he would chant and meditate until he died. His followers would then seal the tomb for 1,000 days. When they reopened it, if the body was found incorrupt, preserved and serene, it was raised, lacquered in gold, and venerated as a true Sokushin Butsu, a Buddha in the flesh. If it had decayed, it was respectfully reburied with honors for the incredible effort. Only about 24 such mummies are known to exist, their skin dark and taut, their features peaceful in eternal meditation. The central physiological mystery here is staggering. Japan is not a dry desert, it is a humid country with significant rainfall. An underground stone tomb in Yamagata is a damp, enclosed space, the perfect incubator for mold and rapid decomposition. By all conventional biological understanding, a body placed there should rot quickly. Yet these monks, through their years of brutal self-denial, altered their very body chemistry to defy this environment. Modern science can describe the process, but cannot fully replicate the results. Researchers point to the bark of the urushi tree, which contains a potent toxin. Consuming it in small amounts over years would have made the monk's body poisonous to the insects and microbes that drive decay. The severe dehydration would have shrunk organs and dried tissues to a leathery state before death even occurred. Essentially, the monk spent years turning himself into a pre-mummified being, a human jerky before entering the tomb. But the precise alchemy remains elusive. How did the specific combination of pine bark, starvation, and toxic plants create a biological fortress against dampness? Why did this work for a select few, while others who attempted the same ritual failed? The Sokushin Butsu stand as the most profound argument for the power of will over flesh. They are not accidents of nature, but triumphs of intention, where the quest for spiritual perfection physically conquered the inevitability of decay. In their silent, golden presence, we are forced to ask where the line truly lies between the mortal and the divine, and what price must be paid to cross it. While the Sokushin Butsu monks achieved preservation through sheer will, the oldest human witness in North America was preserved by pure geological chance. On the wind-swept shores of Santa Rosa Island off the coast of California, a discovery quietly rewrote the timeline of a continent. These are the bones of the Arlington Springs woman, a person who walked that land 13,000 years ago. Her remains, largely skeletal, were found buried in a layer of ancient soil, a fragile time capsule from an era when mammoths still roamed, and the very geography around her was dramatically different. At that time, during the last ice age, so much water was locked in glaciers that global sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. What are now the separate channel islands were connected into one large landmass, which itself was much closer to the mainland. This woman lived not on a remote island, but on a coastal plain, a landscape now almost entirely submerged beneath the Pacific. The miracle is not that her bones are perfectly mummified, but that they survived at all. The environment here is the antithesis of a sterile bog or a dry desert cave. It is a dynamic, erosive coastline, subject to wind, rain, and the relentless pounding of sea level rise over millennia. For her skeleton to endure, it needed to be buried quickly and deeply, sealed away from the elements and scavengers. Scientists believe she was interred in a grave, perhaps by her people, in a layer of fine sediment. This initial burial was the first act of preservation, protecting her from weathering and carnivores. Then, geology took over. As the climate warmed and the glaciers melted, the ocean began its long, slow rise. The rising waters would have flooded the lowlands, but they also deposited new layers of sand and silt over the higher ground where she was buried. Her gravesite became encapsulated, sealed under accumulating sediment that shielded it from the corrosive effects of salt water and the churning action of waves. It was a race between the rising sea and the accumulating land, and for this one spot, the land won, building up just fast enough to keep her tomb intact and dry. The central mystery, therefore, is one of context. How did this specific patch of ground remain stable through 13,000 years of seismic activity, violent storms, and dramatic coastal change? The preservation of her bones is a puzzle, but the preservation of their precise location and the soil around them is a profound geological fluke. It suggests her people chose a remarkably stable place for her final rest, a spot that would somehow escape the catastrophic erosion that surely reshaped the rest of the ancient shoreline. Her remains are a whisper from a lost world, posing urgent questions about the early peopling of the Americas. Her age places her among the very first pioneers, people who navigated a landscape now vanished beneath the waves. What route did she and her community take to reach this island? Did they follow a now drowned coastline, or brave open water in some of the earliest seafaring voyages? Her bones offer no direct answers, only a silent, stubborn fact that challenges simpler migration theories. She is a testament to the fragility of evidence, a single skeleton that survived against astronomical odds, waiting in the island's soil to tell us that the first chapters of human history in America are still being written, one preserved fragment at a time. The Arlington Springs woman survived through geological luck, but a community on the other edge of the Americas took control of death with astonishing skill. In the stark, rainless expanse of Chile's Atacama Desert, the Chinchorro people did something that should not have been possible. 7,000 years ago, 2 millennia before the first Egyptian pyramids were even conceived, these hunter-gatherers were creating the world's oldest known artificial mummies. Their process was not a simple preservation. It was a radical reconstruction of the human form, an act of love and artistry that defies our assumptions about early societies. When a person died, the Chinchorro did not bury them and let nature take its course. They performed a meticulous, almost surgical procedure. The body was completely disassembled. The skin and soft tissues were carefully removed. The organs and brain were extracted. The skeleton was then reinforced with sticks to provide internal structure, as if building a new frame for a cherished figure. The cavity was stuffed with fibers, feathers, or dried plants. Next, the skin was sewn back onto this reinforced form, often using human hair for thread. Finally, the entire body was coated in a paste of black manganese, or, later, red ochre, and a clay mask with simple features was placed over the face. The result was not a corpse, but a statue of a person, a permanent effigy meant to endure forever. The technical sophistication of this process is breathtaking for its time, but it pales before the profound social mystery it represents. In Egypt, mummification was for the elite, the pharaohs and nobles who could afford the costly ritual to secure their place in the afterlife. It was a privilege of power and wealth. For the Chinchorro, it was a universal right. They mummified everyone: men, women, the elderly, and most poignantly, children, infants, and even fetuses. Archaeologists have found tiny mummies, no larger than a loaf of bread, prepared with the same intricate care as an adult. This changes everything. It suggests that for the Chinchorro, the preservation of the body was not about status, but about connection. It was a communal act of remembrance, a way to keep the physical presence of loved ones, especially the most vulnerable, within the circle of the living. The mummies were not hidden in tombs. They were kept in the open, often within the living spaces of their families, attended to, repaired, and repainted over generations. They were active participants in daily life. So what spiritual or social force could drive a simple fishing and foraging culture to invent such a complex, labor-intensive tradition? One theory points to the environment. The Atacama is the driest desert on Earth, a place where natural mummification happens easily. Perhaps the Chinchorro first observed bodies naturally drying and preserving in the arid sand. And this sparked an idea, a desire to perfect what nature had begun, to actively participate in the journey beyond death. Another, more compelling idea is that the high rate of infant mortality, possibly from arsenic poisoning in the water sources, created a deep cultural trauma. The elaborate mummification of babies may have been a desperate attempt to cope with loss, to give a tangible, lasting form to lives cut tragically short, ensuring these souls were not forgotten. The Chinchorro did not leave written records, only these silent, reconstructed figures. They tell us that the human drive to conquer decay, to hold on to those we love, is not a product of advanced civilization, but a fundamental impulse. One that emerged not in the palaces of kings, but in the humble camps of hunters gazing at the endless desert sky, deciding that some bonds were too precious to be surrendered to dust. The Chinchorro mummies were acts of communal love, but the tomb of one Han Dynasty aristocrat achieved a preservation so flawless it borders on science fiction. In 1971, workers digging an air raid shelter near Changsha, China, broke into a hidden chamber, revealing the tomb of Xin Zhui, the Lady of Dai. When archaeologists opened her nested coffins, they found not a skeleton, but a woman who appeared to have died weeks, not millennia, ago. Her skin was still supple and elastic. Her limbs could be gently bent at. The joints and her hair remained rooted in her scalp. Most astonishingly, an autopsy revealed her internal organs were intact. Her blood vessels still held traces of type A blood, and her last meal of melon seeds was identifiable in her stomach. She was and remains the most perfectly preserved human body ever discovered. The secret to her 2,000-year slumber lies in a meticulously engineered tomb that functioned like a biological time capsule. Her body was swathed in 20 layers of silk and sealed inside 4 nested, airtight coffins, each fitting snugly within the next. This wooden Russian doll was then placed in a massive burial chamber 12 meters underground, packed tightly with 5 tons of charcoal to absorb every trace of moisture, and finally sealed under layers of thick, impermeable clay. This created a sterile, dark, and completely oxygen-free environment, a perfect vacuum that halted bacterial life in its tracks. Yet the true, unsolved mystery lies in a subtle, crucial detail. When her innermost coffin was opened, a small amount of a slightly acidic, unknown liquid was found surrounding her body. This was not a flood, but a deliberate, measured presence. The liquid's mild acidity would have further inhibited bacterial growth, while the saturated environment prevented her tissues from drying out and shriveling. It was the final, perfect ingredient in a preservation recipe. But what was it? For decades, scientists have analyzed samples, but the exact composition of this embalming brew remains elusive. It was not mercury, a common Han Dynasty preservative. Some suggest it was an alchemical mixture containing alum and other salts, perhaps even a fermented broth of herbs and grains whose recipe has been lost. The fluid, combined with the flawless physical sealing of the tomb, presents a dual mystery. We understand the principles, the airtight anaerobic chamber and the antimicrobial liquid, but we lack the precise formula and the exact ritual sequence. Did the fluid saturate the burial silks first, or was it poured directly into the coffin? How did the ancient embalmers achieve such a perfectly sterile transfer of the body into this sealed system, avoiding any contamination that could have started decay? The Lady of Dai's tomb was not an accident of nature like a bog or a glacier. It was a triumph of early scientific engineering, a controlled experiment in defeating time that succeeded beyond all modern expectation. Her serene face, still bearing delicate eyelashes, asks us a humbling question. What sophisticated knowledge of chemistry and microbiology did the Han dynasty possess that we have yet to fully rediscover? The meticulous preservation of the Lady of Dai stands in stark contrast to the chaotic, violent end of another Danish bog body. The Borromose man was discovered in 1946, a dark silhouette in the peat. His body was contorted, his skull horrifically crushed. Yet draped over his shoulders was a heavy cape, made of animal hide, its coarse fur still clinging to the leather after 2 millennia. This combination presents two distinct forensic puzzles, each deepening the mystery of his final, terrible moments. The first question is one of sequence. Was the massive trauma to his head the cause of death, or did it happen after he was already dead? The crushing force was immense, suggesting a deliberate, powerful blow, perhaps from a wooden club or a stone. If this injury occurred while his heart was still beating, it would have caused immediate catastrophic bleeding and brain damage, a clear act of lethal violence. However, the unique physics of a peat bog complicates the story. The weight of overlying peat, accumulating slowly over centuries, exerts tremendous, uneven pressure. It is entirely possible the Borromose man was placed in the bog with a different fatal injury, a slit throat or strangulation, and the immense, gradual pressure of the earth itself later collapsed his skull like an eggshell. Modern forensic techniques struggle to distinguish between perimortem trauma, which happens at or near the time of death, and post-mortem damage from such environmental forces. His crushed head could be the signature of a murderer's weapon or the slow, patient signature of the bog itself, leaving us to wonder if we are seeing a murder weapon or a geological artifact. This ambiguity makes his cause of death frustratingly opaque. The second, equally puzzling detail is his cape. Most bog bodies are found naked or with only small fragments of clothing, as the bog acids are particularly efficient at dissolving plant-based fibers like wool or linen. Yet the Borromose man's hide cape survived in remarkable condition. This selective preservation points to the unique chemistry of animal hide. The cape was essentially raw leather, a material already treated by natural tannins in the animal's skin. When submerged in the bog, these natural tannins interacted with the bog's own acids, essentially retanning the hide and making it more resistant to decay. It was a perfect, if accidental, chemical match. His cape was not just clothing, it was a second skin preserved by the same process that tanned his own. This survival asks a poignant question about his final moments. Was he wearing the cape when he was killed, suggesting his death was sudden, perhaps an ambush on a cold day? Or was the cape placed on him after death, part of a ritual preparation for his journey into the bog? The cape's presence feels intentional, a deliberate part of his presentation to the gods or the deep. Together, the crushed skull and the surviving cape create a haunting duality. He is both a victim of brutal, physical force and an individual accorded a specific, tangible dignity. He was sent into the dark water with a garment meant for warmth and protection, even as his body was subjected to what appears to be extreme violence. The Borromose man forces us to hold two conflicting images at once: broken body and a cared-for soul, leaving us to ponder whether his community saw his death as an execution, a sacrifice, or a solemn offering wrapped in hide and shadow. The careful hide cape of the Borromose man was preserved by a familiar chemistry, but the final witnesses on our journey were sealed away by a sudden, catastrophic plunge into a different world. The Confederate submarine H.L. Hunley rests on the seafloor off Charleston, South Carolina, a sleek iron cigar that vanished in 1864 after becoming the first combat submarine to sink an enemy warship. For over a century, its location and the fate of its 8-man crew remained a mystery. When the vessel was finally raised in the year 2000, archaeologists peered inside to find a scene suspended in time. The crewmen were not scattered skeletons. They were found still seated at their stations, their bodies forming silent, haunting silhouettes against the iron hull. They had not been preserved as mummies, but as something perhaps more poignant, detailed, three-dimensional casts of their own forms, created by the very sediment that entombed them. As the submarine filled with water and settled into the seabed, a fine, silty mud began to seep inside. This sediment, rich in clay and organic particles, flowed around the bodies of the crew, filling every space and contour. Over the decades, the sediment compacted and hardened, but the organic material of the bodies themselves slowly decayed within this muddy mold. As the flesh and clothing dissolved, they left behind a perfect cavity, a negative space holding the exact shape of a man sitting at a crank or leaning against a bulkhead. In some cases, archaeologists were able to pour a special plaster into these cavities, pulling out ghostly positive casts that showed the weave of a jacket, the fold of a cap, or the set of a jaw. These are not the men themselves, but their shadows in clay, the final moment of their duty captured with sculptural precision. This phenomenon alone is a rare archaeological gift, but the Hunley site presented a deeper, more confounding scientific puzzle. The environment here was, by all textbook standards, perfect for total destruction. The submarine lay in cold, saline, oxygenated seawater, conditions that typically promote rapid bacterial growth and scavenging by marine life. Wood, cloth, and flesh should have vanished within years. Yet, against all odds, more than just sediment casts survived. Investigators found astonishingly well-preserved soft tissue impressions, fragments of clothing, and even personal effects like a delicate gold coin or a pocket watch. The iron hull of the Hunley itself played a crucial role, corroding slowly and releasing compounds that likely created a localized chemical environment hostile to the microbes that cause decay. But the true mystery is the specific hyperlocal marine chemistry that defied the usual rules. Scientists theorize that the particular mix of sediments low in oxygen but rich in certain minerals combined with the corrosion products from the iron to create a unique microenvironment inside the sealed crew compartment. It might have been slightly acidic or saturated with dissolved silica that began to petrify the outer layers of tissue and fabric, effectively sealing them off from further degradation. The submarine became an accidental laboratory, a sealed iron flask on the seafloor where the normal processes of oceanic decay were interrupted by a freakish confluence of mud, metal, and mineral. This selective preservation forces a difficult question: why here and not elsewhere? Countless shipwrecks in similar waters yield only ballast stones and cannons. The Hunley's crew, however, were granted a strange, metallic afterlife. Their silent, seated forms make their story uniquely intimate, a frozen tableau of human endeavor and sacrifice. They did not simply vanish into the deep, they were captured by it, held in a muddy embrace that refused to let them fade away. Their preservation asks us to consider the countless other secrets locked in unlikely places, where the very elements that should destroy a thing instead conspire through some forgotten alchemy to keep its memory solid and real. From the iron tomb of the Hunley to the sacred peaks of the Andes, these 30 witnesses share a single, profound condition. They exist in a state of perfect ambiguity. Each body was saved by a different alchemy: the tannic acid of a bog, the sterile cold of a glacier, the desiccating salt of a mine, or the still air of a sealed crypt. Yet for everyone, a critical piece of the puzzle remains stubbornly absent. We understand the environment that preserved the flesh, but we lack the final word on the heart, the mind, and the moment. Was it sacrifice or murder, faith or catastrophe, a solemn ritual or a desperate accident? The very forces that froze them in time also froze their stories mid-sentence. This collective silence is what makes them far more than historical curiosities. They are portals. Through them, we glimpse the intimate fears of the Chinchorro mother wrapping her infant in clay, the solemn duty of the Inca priest leading a child up the mountain, and the communal terror of an Iron Age village offering a life to the hungry earth. They are snapshots of lost cultures, forgotten disasters, and personal journeys that would otherwise have vanished without a trace. But they are also mirrors, reflecting the enduring limits of our own understanding. No matter how advanced our science becomes, these bodies hold a core mystery that resists dissection. They remind us that history is not just about dates and events, but about the fragile, fleeting human experiences that are so easily erased. So we are left to wonder, which of these eternal enigmas speaks to you most deeply? Is it the serene, tolerant man, the screaming mummy of the pharaohs, or the reconstructed form of a 7,000-year-old child? Perhaps your choice reveals something about our shared fascination, a desire to look directly into the face of time and ask it a question. In peering into their preserved eyes, we are ultimately confronting our own relationship with mortality, searching for clues about what endures when everything else is gone. What do you think these silent witnesses are trying to tell us? Share your theories in the comments below, and if you want to journey deeper into history's greatest puzzles, be sure to like this video and subscribe.